Welcome to the Sanity Project Podcast, the place for techies and non-techies who work in the techie world whose work-life balance plan has imploded. We're here to provide solutions that will help both the techie and non-techie live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Here's your host, Joanne Victoria.
Hi, this is Joanne Victoria with another episode of the Sanity Project Podcast. And this is a platform for experts in the personal development and techie communities to share their wisdom, expertise, and solutions that will help the techie and non-techie live a sane, healthy, and prosperous life. Well, our guest today is going to add more sanity to your repertoire. Our guest today is Charmaine Hammond. Charmaine Hammond. She's an MA, BA, CSP, and an expert in collaboration and conflict resolution, and helps teams enhance their skills and abilities to resolve conflicts, work better together, and build resilient/productive workplaces. She is a certified speaking professional, the CSP part, and for more than 2 decades, Charmaine has worked with thousands of clients from the municipal government, associations, gas and energy sector, to emergency responders, government, healthcare, industry, nonprofit organizations, professional associations, entrepreneurs, small businesses, and everything in between, although I don't know what's left. So Charmaine, with her over 20 years of experience, is going to talk to us today about communication and conflict resolution, getting through the messy conversations at work. So welcome to the show, Charmaine Hammond. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm amazing. Today is a good day. It's always nice to have a good day.
It is, and it's great to be talking about a conversation that we have to deal with so often in the workplace. Messy conversations.
I know people avoid them a lot from my experience and try not to have them. And I keep telling them you can't avoid the inevitable, because if you don't deal with it up front, it's going to hit you in the butt someday.
It always does. And it hits you in the butt with other people, because one of the things I learned many years ago as a corporate mediator, I was a chartered mediator and facilitated loads of, hundreds and hundreds of cases of workplace conflict. And one of the things I heard time and time again was that people, for many reasons, as you said, they delay the conversation, they're afraid of hurting someone's feelings, they just want to avoid it completely. And in doing so, it allows that conflict so much more time to build intensity, more emotion, it becomes more deeply protracted. And the other thing that happens is it picks up all kinds of other champions and supporters as people start to pick sides of the fence and build their camps around the issues. So I so agree with you about dealing with it early, because it just doesn't get better.
Well, it not only doesn't get better, in the retelling, it becomes something else. Nobody ever remembers verbatim what happens except maybe you and me. But most people only remember what their emotions tell them they should remember. And if the emotions are hit hard by having a conflict, they're going to reframe what they experienced in a way that benefits them, not the situation. So, it's a matter of taking care of it as quickly as possible. So I guess that would be your number one.
Absolutely. I saw so many cases come before me as a mediator that could have been dealt with months, even years. Some of the conflicts that I was facilitating the resolution of were 5, 6, 7-year-old conflicts. And you think, wow, what, and a tremendous amount of stress on people. And how did that affect everybody else in the team?
Yes, and I'm sure they lost people due to that conflict. People left the job and then carried that gossip to another company, because people don't stop gossiping. So when you say, okay, quickly take care of it, what is the first step that someone should take if they are involved in a conflict? And what are the normal conflicts, if that's such a thing, that occur? What are things that occur more frequently than others?
I would say one of the things that occurs is, in terms of miscommunication, is that whole rumor mill and gossip mill. And when people don't have an answer, they make it up. And then, so often what people are doing is they're relying on inaccurate information and making decisions based on that and acting out those decisions. And then a whole bunch of other issues and challenges come up that they then have to deal with because of that.
And what is the cost to the people during this time?
Oh, the cost to the people. I mean, we lose productivity. We see declines in morale. We see company reputation being damaged, where it becomes harder to recruit people. They don't want to work for that company. We see really good, skilled employees leaving the team or asking for a transfer or leaving the company altogether. And we also see the ripple effect it has on our employees' families. People go home and they take the day's work home with them, and family loses quality time with their loved ones.
Yeah, I have this issue, hopefully, that it's not something that I ever did too well, but don't take your work home, as little as possible, because if you've got a problem at work, that's where it belongs, at that door, not the front door of your house.
Yeah, it's so true. I always talk to my clients about creating transitions, having that activity that marks, I've now left work and I'm now at home. And years ago, when I worked in the correctional system as a leader, I had a really tough time creating that transition and a really tough time separating home from work. And my husband had made a comment at the time. He said, Charmaine, you bring that burgundy briefcase home with you every single day and you never open it. Like, what's even in there? And of course, I would pack up my paperwork from the day, bring it home with great intentions of doing it. And I was spent. I was exhausted when I got home. And so what I decided to do was, instead of loading it up with paperwork that never got done, and it just stressed me out having it there, I actually brought the briefcase home. It had my lunch containers in it and a pen. And my transition was, when I came home, the lunch containers came out, the briefcase went in the closet, and that sort of marked my time as being, work is finished, I'm now at home, and my family gets the best of me while I'm here.
Yeah, there has to be something that you place in your brain, so there's a new groove in your brain that knows that there is a space between work and home, and your pattern of emptying out the food cases and cleaning out your briefcase and then putting it in the closet put a clear barrier between you and work when you were at home.
Yeah, it did.
And especially if one knows that that's what they're doing, because that's their intention to make it happen, it's even more powerful.
Yes, absolutely.
You chose the method, you finished the method, and you knew what you were doing, and everybody appreciated that.
Yeah. And I'll be really honest, it took a long time to get used to that new behavior and to not feel guilty that I wasn't doing work. But, when you, in that job, in that role, my work was to be able to serve my team and the clients best I could when I was on the job or at work. And then, same applies in family. So I really found that I had to reframe a lot of things and a lot of priorities. But as I did that, interesting thing happened. Communication became easier. And a lot of that was because I wasn't feeling the stress. I wasn't placing such high demands on myself. And all of that impacts our relationship. So conflict aside, how we're doing just emotionally in our own personal life has the ability to either support us in our professional working relationships or really get in the way.
Absolutely. So what happens if at work there is a conflict between an employee, or in some cases a contractor, as opposed to an outside consultant, but an employee or a contractor with their manager or somebody high up, as opposed to a peer?
Yeah. It's so interesting because those were the majority of cases that I used to mediate.
Oh, good.
And what was interesting, I always looked at what happened to make this get to mediation. Like, where were there steps missed, or what could have happened differently so that this manager and team member didn't need to go through that formal of a process. And what I discovered was 100% of the cases, the employee, even when they had an exceptionally positive relationship with their manager, there was just a strong discomfort of approaching your manager, your leader, with feedback, especially of the constructive nature, or being in conflict with the manager. So it was high pressure for the employee, and they didn't know how to approach it. And in many cases, the manager leader was not overly welcoming of the feedback or the conversation. And so in these cases, the conflict would be avoided, and then people start to act out what they're frustrated about. So the conflict comes out just in different ways. It comes out through, our behaviors. So I would say in those cases in the workplace, it is so important to have that conversation, because it's a lot easier to have it sooner. But sometimes if we're feeling nervous or unprepared or not even sure what to say, if you work in a company where there's an HR department, that can be a place where you can get some mentoring. The other thing that can be really helpful is that skill of being vulnerable and transparent. And I've had times in my own career when I before I opened up my own business, where I had differences of opinions with my leadership team and the people above the leadership team, and I had to bring that forward. And I was so nervous because I thought, geez, this could be my job. And what I did was I just expressed my discomfort to them. I said, I'm really uncomfortable about this, but I value our relationship enough and appreciate you as a leader and want to make sure I have this conversation so our relationship isn't impacted. And they said, sure. And my expressing that I was a little uncomfortable and nervous about it just brought the tension level down and actually engaged them more in the conversation, because I wasn't being defensive. I wasn't being agitated. I was trying to frame a conversation in a positive, vulnerable way. And in all of those cases, those really tough, messy conversations turned out okay.
Good. So here we are with an employee and their manager / leader. They have an issue. They have a situation going on, and the employee is afraid because their survival instincts kick in. Am I going to lose my job, and am I going to get a bad review? Are they going to say bad things about me if I leave this job to get another job, which is it's a terrible place to be. It's like everybody vomiting at the same time. It's like
it is.
They get just so scared, they go to that nauseous place, or they start getting stressed out and get headaches and start taking, medications for that.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? I mean, you came up with a good thing that you did, that you put yourself in a vulnerable position and spoke clearly without being defensive to your superior, which I hate. I mean, I hate that kind of the language even bothers
the
me.
language. Yes.
The superior, inferior, because if there's a superior, that must be that you're inferior if you're an employee.
Yeah, the law of opposites. Yep.
Yeah, there's got to be some way around that, but that's another conversation, maybe.
Yes.
And so you're saying they could go to HR. So for some tips, tools, and strategies to how to do this. My experience with HR has not been that they were that ready, willing, and able to deal with the employee, especially if the employee is dealing with a higher up.
Mm-hmm.
So tell our audience what they can do with HR.
Yeah, so with HR, and I do a lot of work, a lot of the work that comes to me comes through HR, so I've been able to spend a lot of time with them. And one of the tips that an HR professional gave me really stuck, and that was, she said something to the effect of, sometimes we feel that the way someone is presenting the issue is coming to us and sort of dumping on us, or we're feeling that it's a complaint, which puts a conversation in a whole different ballpark. And she said, when people can come to us and say, this is not about a complaint, I've got to have a feedback conversation with my leader, and I really value that relationship, and I'm really uncomfortable. I don't know how to get it started. I'm looking for some mentoring or guidance. I don't want this kind of recorded as a complaint conversation. I'm looking for mentoring and guidance. And so sometimes I've seen HR people just sit down and role play the conversation. I've seen that happen, which has been effective. In a couple of cases, I've seen them refer to someone in the organization like an early intervention neutral. And in cases where you may not get the support from HR and it feels like a dead end, I would suggest practicing the conversation before you have it. In fact, you should do this always. But typically what happens in conflict is that because people are so uncomfortable about having the conversation, they tend not to prepare for it. And if you think about it, you're having one of the most important conversations of your life, and you're going in cold, unprepared, and highly emotional. And just a little bit of preparation can really help. And the way that I suggest doing this is to take a notepad and a Sharpie marker, not a pen or not a pencil, but a Sharpie marker, and just write down the bullet points, the point form points that you need to say to your leader, that you need that leader to understand. And then you actually go into a room where there's a mirror. So in a workplace, this could be tough. So I've actually done this many times in the parking lot, talking to the mirror, my rear view mirror in the car to practice. But what you do when you practice is you have the conversation with the mirror. And I know this sounds crazy, but it is so powerful. Because as you're talking and expressing what it is you need to say to the other person and practicing your part of the conversation, you're working through a lot of your own drama. You see how you're going to appear in the real life conversation with that person. If you're not liking how you sound, if something isn't landing well, you can change it. And the other part is that so many people, when they go to speak to their leader or manager, it's like they get brain freeze. You know, you show up in a conversation, you can't remember what the heck you wanted to say. And if you've practiced it 10 times, your brain will come to the rescue. And because you've practiced it, it'll just find the words. So your conversation goes better because you've worked through some of the drama and the emotion that you're carrying with the issue. And if you think about a conversation, if it's between two people, each of you has a lot of influence over how that conversation goes, just by how you show up.
Yes, if you show up defensive and or scared, you've got two strikes against you right there. It's very difficult because your emotional state will just be, it's not functioning, it's empty. You've got nothing. You're walking in empty.
Right. And then what happens is that other person, in this case, the manager or leader, is not listening to what is being said. They're listening to what they see.
Yes.
And that's a very different response. So when we can be calm and grounded, and it's okay to say, I'm nervous about this, but this is a really important issue to me, and I really need your ear for a few minutes. And when you're authentic and calm and respectful, you're setting the tone for how you want that other person to deal with you. When you go in upset and angry and defensive and pushing back and what you do is you invite that kind of response back. It's sort of like mirroring and modeling how we show up shapes how we get treated.
Do you think there is any difference between men and women and their approach to their managers?
It's interesting. I have seen. I know there are some sort of stereotyped things that we hear about how women communicate and how men communicate. And what I've learned after working with thousands and thousands of people is that people are people. And regardless of gender, there are typically things that we do as people. And I think what's more important is to recognize our working style and our communication style. For example, I don't know if you've ever heard of Hal Stacks. And he has this working style inventory. It's called, I just love this tool. And he says there's 4 working styles: a driver, an expressive, an amiable, and a, who am I missing? Driver, expressive, amiable, and analytical. And each of those working styles communicates a little differently. And they're all important working styles. And how we can learn to reduce stress is to learn how to work with the styles that are different than our own. So just a real quick example, the driver working style is that get her done person. Get it done, don't want the backstory, let's just get to results. But what happens with the amiable working style, who's all about relationship, all about peace and harmony is they feel really rushed. They feel almost bombarded, and they want to share the backstory because they're trying to create context. And so what happens in conflict is not so much about differences in gender. It's usually about differences in personality and differences in the way we work and communicate. And I think that's where we can really make a difference, learning how those styles work and how to work with them better.
So you have many books. You've been a part of many books, and you've written some on your own. And I see one here that is called a GPS Your Best Life: Charting Your Destination and Getting There in Style.
Yeah.
What information does that book contain that will help people?
One of the things I loved about writing that book with Deborah Kozowski, my co-author on the book, is that we sort of looked at life and business as going on a journey. And that's where we came up with the title, GPS Your Best Life. And in that journey of life, there's a lot of things that we can work on and build on to create a higher success level for ourselves and more happiness and less stress. And so part of that is mindset. And the book talks about mindset and how what we think about shapes our actions and how we deal with people and communicate. It also talks about setting goals, how to have those conversations when things get bumpy in relationships. And it also talks about managing stress and looking at what are the priorities, where do we need to put our focus on so we can let go of some of the things that don't need our energy so that we can show up in a better way where it's really needed. And so really it's like a guidebook.
You're very good, Charmaine Hammond. You have a lot of valid and actionable information and insights for the audience to apply on the job, at work, however I want to call it. But this is really important information. Okay. So, we've covered 4 working styles, which was new. And then it's a matter of how you communicate with these different working styles based on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you need a guideline of how to act, if you need a script, so to speak, you go to HR. If they don't have one, role play and or take notes. To me, handwriting is so important because when you write it down, you make it real.
Yeah.
And then you can look at your top 4. I wouldn't think more than 4 things should be discussed anyway, ever.
Yep.
Because that's number 4 is the number of foundation. And so you take your notes. I always tell people to slip them on a 3x5 card and put them in their pocket in case they forget.
Yes. Yeah.
Or just have your book and your pen with you because there's nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely.
And be calm and grounded.
Yeah.
What else do we have here? I've taken notes because I do that just automatically. And be vulnerable.
Yes.
And be open to the opportunity of healing this. I don't want to say fix this because that sounds, again, I'm a combination of drive, expressive, amiable, and analytical. So I have to use it. Since I started using my whole brain several years ago, I'm all of it. But, if the bottom line is be nice, don't go in expecting a fight.
Yes.
Which is, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I couldn't agree with you more. And I look at all the people I've met as a mediator and now as a speaker, I go into companies and do training for them. And I hear stories time and time again. And sometimes I leave feeling so sad when I hear all these stories because so many of these conversations that went sideways and the conflicts were completely avoidable had they have just had a conversation, even if the conversation wasn't perfect and messy. But when we wait, when we let other people get involved, when we communicate when we're angry, it misses what you've said, that act of kindness and just being nice to one another. And it's amazing how far-reaching that can be. And I think a lot of times in conflict, we get our defenses up, we become positional, and how we communicate isn't pleasant and it's not collaborative. And it can really damage a relationship. And when trust is damaged, is so difficult to restore. Really, really difficult.
Yes, I've experienced that and observed it through the years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you cannot get it back. It's just difficult. It's why there are so many divorces, because people don't talk enough. They're not nice enough to each other. All they've got to do is be nice. Just be nice. Yeah. Treat your partner like you would treat your pet. And then we're there, you know?
Yeah. Okay. And, you know, I was going to add to that. It was something you said just reminded me of the fact that so many times we make assumptions that a person is being a certain way for a reason. And here's the deal. We don't know what somebody experienced 5 minutes earlier before we walked in their office all angry and upset. And they could have just got off the phone with, getting bad news about an in-law. You know, maybe their dog has to go to the vet. Maybe the house that they wanted to buy fell through. So inside of the work, we have all these other pressures and challenges that all of us, including our leaders, are dealing with. And when we can show a sense of compassion and understanding and hold the urge to make assumptions about people, it really goes a long way in having a conversation that, even if a little bit bumpy, can be really, really valuable and help resolve those issues. And there's just a tendency for us to just get in there and, you know, I want you to listen and you never do this. And we go into blame and shame and judgment. And never do I see good results come from those conversations.
They never do. Compassion and non-judgment are really at the top of my list when I'm talking to people and talking to clients. You know, understand where the other person is coming from. And if you don't know, keep your mouth shut.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful. And I'm sure our audience has got a lot of tips and tools that they can write down, as I did. And people say, well, if you're writing, how can you listen? And believe it or not, the way I write, I can listen.
Yeah. I totally get that.
Yeah, I want Charmaine to hear from you. Charmaine, where can people find you?
Probably the best place would be my website, which is charmainehammond.com, and Charmaine is spelt with a C.
Okay, this is what I usually do. Charmaine, CHARMAINE, Hammond, HAMMOND.com, because everybody has their own way of spelling.
Right, that's true.
And if they're just listening to this and they want to find out about you on their phone immediately, hopefully when they're getting through driving and they've pulled over, they can do it now and they don't have to wait until you get in your office. So I am grateful that you were here today, Charmaine Hammond, because you're very knowledgeable and you share your knowledge easily and effortlessly with our audience. And as I always say to the audience, and I will repeat it again because everything has to be repeated at least 3, if not 11 times, re-listen to this podcast. And when you do, go to iTunes and give Charmaine an outstanding testimonial. And you can also give a thumbs up for the Sanity Project podcast as well. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. And Charmaine, thanks for being a wonderful guest. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sanity Project podcast. Please go to AskJoanneVictoria.com to listen to more podcasts and get a free copy of her report, 5 Steps to Achieve Work-Life Balance. That's AskJoanneVictoria.com. Take care, and thanks for being here.